During a recent campaign speech in which he boasted of his own cognitive abilities, convicted felon Donald Trump took a shot at President Biden's mental fitness and demanded that Biden take a cognitive test. And then, just a few seconds later, Trump completely butchered the name of the right-wing doctor who administered his own cognitive test. And we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, I have several clips to show you in this video, and some of them are quite funny, namely Donald Trump face planting in such an epic fashion while he's trying to dunk on President Biden's mental fitness. As a matter of fact, let's just start with that. Here is Donald Trump, convicted felon, in all his stupid glory.
I think he should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas? He was the White House doctor. And he said I was the healthiest president he feels in history. So I liked him very much immediately. In fact, he said if I didn't eat junk food, I would live to 200. That's what.
Yeah, so the doctor's name is Ronnie Jackson, not Ronnie Johnson. He repeatedly called him Ronnie Johnson while boasting about his cognitive abilities. And I should say, Congressman Jackson is hardly a reputable source. I mean, this guy used to serve in the Navy, and he was, in fact, President Obama's physician as well. And then he has publicly disgraced himself by suggesting that the 78-year-old obese Donald Trump with a terrible diet is actually more healthy than Barack Obama. And Jackson has also said that Donald Trump has just an amazing memory while trying to downplay concerns of Trump's mental unfitness for office. Here's a reminder.
And Trump extensively for hours at a time. And I can tell you he is as sharp now as he was when I knew him 30 years ago. There's no decline, zero. He makes one little mistake, the media goes insane. We have about 20 seconds.
Sean, he's incredibly sharp. He's got a better memory than I have, than you have. We all know.
And Trump extensively.
Ronnie, he can't even remember your damn name. Okay, so it's just so funny. That clip, by the way, between Hannity and Jackson was from months ago. But it's funny to bring up because, again, Jackson has disgraced himself with the lies that he is willing to tell about Donald Trump's physical and mental health. I'll also point out from that same clip, convicted felon Donald Trump swore that he would take questions at the end of a speech and then didn't.
You are. At the end of the speech, I'll be taking some questions, so this is different than Joe Biden. He doesn't take any questions.
That's Trump walking off stage without taking any questions and being patted on the back by right-wing lunatic Charlie Kirk, who founded that particular organization, Turning Point USA. So again, convicted. This is going to be very different from crooked Joe Biden. I'm going to take questions, except I'm not. Just kidding. What an absolute loser surrounded by absolute losers. The upshot of this is, again, that, there's actually being more attention, increasingly more attention paid to Donald Trump's cognitive deficits by the very same standard that people want to harshly grade President Biden. I want to play this clip in which CNN host Jim Acosta kind of moderates a debate here, and he talks to Scott Jennings, who is a CNN analyst who is shamelessly in Trump's pocket. But this topic is brought up, Donald Trump's mental unfitness for office, and see what Scott Jennings has to say.
What's going on here? And Andrew Ross Sorkin's very credible business journalist saying at this roundtable, CEOs were walking out of the room scratching their heads.
Yeah, look, I think that these CEOs are ultimately going to choose to support someone that they think is going to be best for their business. And, I think most of them are going to conclude that it's the Republicans. It would be better for them to have Republican governance and not have the government bringing down the heavy hand on them 24 hours a day like it happens under Joe Biden. I mean, look, if you're worried about incoherence, look, Joe Biden has claimed his uncle was eaten by cannibals. He has claimed he was arrested with Nelson Mandela. He has claimed all kinds of crazy things that make no sense whatsoever. And so I hear people unspooling this about Donald Trump. It's just, do you not know who he's running against? This attack on him for this is not going to work. And it's because of Joe Biden constantly, every day.
But Biden, I think, gets a lot of coverage for it.
About himself.
Biden gets a lot of coverage for it, in particular on a certain network. But Scott, Trump talking about sharks and do you stay in the boat or do you get eaten by the shark or do you get electrocuted? I've watched that one clip, I think, like 100 times in the last week. I still don't know what the hell that is.
None of us do. And of course, they're referring to something that we covered in a previous video, which is that Donald Trump met with a bunch of Trump-friendly CEOs, right, who are eager to support the Republican candidate, especially one who wants to cut taxes for them and their corporations. And according to Andrew Ross Sorkin of CNBC, which is a pretty pro-Trump outlet, watch some of the Squawk Box in which Sorkin and Joe Kernan, co-moderate. It's pretty Trump-friendly. He reported that many of them told Sorkin that they walked away being less Trump-friendly because they thought he was an idiot, that they thought he was meandering, that he was completely incoherent. That is incredibly damaging. And again, in the interest of fairness, if we're going to talk about presidential candidates' mental fitness, that stuff is important to talk about as well, instead of just hyperfixating on President Biden. Scott Jennings wants to make the case, well, listen, it doesn't matter because Biden's worse. If you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, you are free to make that argument, but at least hold them to the same standard. I would take the position that Trump is just objectively worse for reasons I've laid out before and probably will at the end of this video. But I also want to focus again on the double standard here. And Alex Wagner on MSNBC, I want to play a couple of clips from one of her more recent episodes in which she again nails the asymmetry of expectation that's imposed on President Biden compared to convicted felon Donald Trump.
Though President Biden receives far more press for his verbal miscues and mistakes, the reality is that Donald Trump is in a league of his own when it comes to strange non sequiturs and rambling anecdotes that lead nowhere and fantastical scenarios that have no basis in reality. Even against that backdrop, though, the ad-libbed hypothetical that Mr. Trump presented this past weekend in Nevada, it really stood out.
And she plays the clip about, Donald Trump saying, listen, maybe the battery will cause a boat to sink and then you're going to be surrounded by sharks. And then what do you do? If there's a shark here in a sinking boat, what are you going to do? We've played that clip in a previous video as well. Some more from Alex Wagner.
But as absurd as these moments are, as surreal as the sinking boat shark bite scenario is, there is weirdly a strategy in play here. Trump's apparent conditioning of a large swath of the American public to accept his incoherent rambling as normal, or at least as something other than addled and alarming, has become one of his biggest campaign advantages. With the spotlight on President Biden's age and acuity, Trump and all of his malapropisms have seemingly gotten a pass. And there is no better day to put Trump's aging but florid mind into perspective than today, because today is Donald Trump's birthday.
And it was his birthday at the time. But again, she's emphasizing what we've talked about here, which is that there is a double standard. There is an asymmetry in which both mainstream and obviously right wing, but even mainstream media seems to grade Trump on a curve. One last clip here in which Alex Wagner interviews a guest about that very topic.
It's almost like what he says is beside the point. The fact that he's up there standing, still talking is enough, the Trump team thinks, to placate anyone or dissuade them from thinking that he's somehow addled. And thus far, they seem to be right. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's way more scrutiny on President Biden than there is on President Trump, former President Trump, given the absurd tirades and non sequiturs that are now a part of his daily routine.
Well, look, that's right. And again, part of the problem is the fire hose of lies and BS problem, which is to say that if we already feel Trump has overwhelmed us with bizarre digressions for years, then unpacking what's new and different becomes so hard that people just throw up their hands. But remember, person, woman, man, camera, TV in 2020, Donald Trump has always graded himself on a curve in the same way that Jason Miller there is grading Trump on a curve, saying, oh, no, it's OK.
But again, I understand. I mean, not making it right, but I understand why Trump is going to grade himself on a curve. A lot of people do, especially a malignant narcissist like him. It's the rest of us. It's the media's obligation to say, no, we're talking about two men who were President Biden and ex-President Trump, and they both want to be president again. They should be held to the same standard. This is my beef with, I have a lot of issues with Ben Shapiro, but this is one of my biggest ones with him is because he's repeatedly said he grades Trump on a curve. Trump is different. Why is Trump different? Because Trump is more proximate to his ideological, concerns, his ideological outcomes. Trump is a vector for people like Ben Shapiro to get what they want. Therefore, they're inclined to grade him on a curve. It doesn't matter what the merits are. It doesn't matter what the substance is. They can use him politically, and so they give him a pass. That's pathetic. And it's unacceptable. It's irrational. It should be mocked relentlessly. And the media should play a role in correcting that. Again, at the end of the day, if the two candidates are, disparately mentally unfit for office, if one is worse than the other, then fair enough, point it out. But don't grade Donald Trump on a curve. Don't give him a pass. Evaluate him on the merits as you do President Biden, and then evaluate accordingly. See which one is worse. Now, for my part, again, President Biden is just objectively better than Donald Trump. Yes, Joe Biden is old. Yes, we see some signs of age-related cognitive decline as what happens. The verbal agility, the verbal acuity diminishes. But we have no evidence that his executive function are in any way compromised. As a matter of fact, as we discussed, we've seen Republicans, like Kevin McCarthy is a good example. Kevin McCarthy, when he was negotiating with President Biden, when McCarthy was Speaker of the House in 2023 during the debt ceiling crisis, McCarthy publicly made fun of Biden, but privately, this is the key, privately told his aides that Biden was a sharp negotiator. And as a matter of fact, Biden did get the better of McCarthy during those negotiations, as Matt Gaetz himself pointed out on the floor of the House, which is one of the reasons why he wanted to remove McCarthy from the speakership. He said something to the effect of, quote, "It's going to be very difficult for my Republican colleagues to say that President Biden is an addled buffoon when he continues to take Kevin McCarthy's lunch money." So we can evaluate these on the merits, and Biden typically outperforms the Republicans. He outmaneuvers them. We see it during his State of the Union addresses when they try to heckle them, and he redirects it for his political benefit, like when he baited them into agreeing not to cut Social Security and Medicare. We can also evaluate the fact that many people who worked with Donald Trump closely in his administration, former cabinet officials and senior staff, say that he's an idiot, that he's unfit for office. They say these things about him. So I'm sorry, just an objective analysis of the substance reveals much more evidence that President Biden is better fit for office than Donald Trump. And the polls show, by the way, as much as people want to talk about the polls being bad for Biden, the polls are pretty bad for Trump with respect to mental fitness. We've covered them before. Usually majorities of Americans also agree that Donald Trump is mentally unfit for office, and that's with Trump benefiting from the asymmetry in the coverage of the media. Imagine how it would look for Trump if this was given equal playtime, if they were held to the same standard. So the guest there, Susan Glasser, she was the one that Alex Wagner was interviewing. She has a really good op-ed on Donald Trump and his mental fitness, and she posted it on his birthday. But also, Jennifer Rubin has a really good post in the Washington Post about this. She says, I want to find the exact quotes here, right here. "The White House occupant is not a Jeopardy contestant, a stand-up comic, a talk show host, or guest. The president is the head of the executive branch and commander-in-chief. The job of being president is executive management, something with which political reporters, as opposed to business reporters, have virtually no expertise. We should be asking whether a candidate can absorb necessary details, make good personnel decisions, reach sound conclusions, evaluate risk, and consider the consequences of actions. Can the president separate personal interests from the interests of the nation, of allies, or even the planet? That is what the president does day after day. And we don't need to be armchair psychiatrists to evaluate that sort of presidential fitness. As I have written, this is her. Trump's closest colleagues tell us he's willfully ignorant, cannot grasp basic concepts, cannot absorb written material. As for his hiring decisions, by his own admission, he has hired a slew of dumb or incompetent people. He gloms onto ridiculous quack theories, and he channels the ideas and rhetoric of America's enemies and historical villains." Right there. I'm sorry. If anyone wants to have doubts about Joe Biden, fair enough. But comparing him to Trump, Biden is objectively better on the substance, to say nothing of the fact that Biden has gotten more of his agenda accomplished than Trump, despite similar circumstances. Trump had control of both the House and the Senate when he came into office, and he had the Supreme Court. President Biden has never had the Supreme Court, but he had control of both the House and Senate by razor-thin margins for 2 years, and he's just gotten more of his agenda accomplished. Even if you hate the agenda, that is a sign of greater competence. This is what Democrats and honest people, rational brokers in the media, need to be talking about if they're going to make competence a serious question of this campaign. Fair enough. Hold both candidates to the same standard. If they do that, Donald Trump will lose every time. Let me know what you think in the comments.